Okay, so this year is called The Metaphysical Implications of Stubbing Your Toe. Okay. And first a disclaimer and then a disclaimer. All right. The short disclaimer is really, strictly speaking, the source that we're going to examine would suggest that the title should be The Metaphysical Implications of Scraping Your Toe. But stub is just one of the most like adorable verbs. And like stubbing your toe just sounded like a better title than scraping your toe. So just know that like, I'm distorting the truth a little bit for the sake of a better title. All right. So I mentioned this in the shiur description, but I will reiterate it here, that I think that there is a problem with the way that we, I don't know if it's a problem with the way we learn about hashgachah, about God's providence, or a way that I don't know what to call it. I don't know where the problem lies, but I'll describe the problem. The problem is you have a lot of statements of Chazal that are like one-liner statements that seem to presuppose a great amount of knowledge about how God's hashgachah works, how reward and punishment works, about divine justice. Okay, and it seems like these statements are meant to be like quoted and said among the average person. Okay, so examples that people I think know about are, gamzu latova, right? This too is for the good. Lesser known one is ein davar yayor min hashamayim, nothing bad comes from heaven. Statements like mida keneged mida. There are lots of these statements like that. And the problem, and this is a problem with me, but the problem is like this: is the knowledge of God's hashgachah and reward and punishment and tzaddik v'ralo and rasha v'tovlo and all this stuff, it's really, really deep and broad and complex knowledge. So the question is like, what are Chazal expecting us to do when we encounter these statements? Like, are they expecting us to just like not quote or use or factor in these statements until we've learned through all of Sefer Eov, or like learn through all the Rishonim on these topics and then like only process it in that way? I suspect not, because it does seem like a lot of these are meant to be said by the average person. In fact, the Gamzu Latova one is, I think it says a person should always accustom himself to say Gamzu Latova, and that's not just talking about people who have advanced knowledge of hashgachah. Yeah, Esti? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, I have a question. Yeah. So, I mean, you said it's deep and broad and complex, but it's also not something we can entirely know, right? Like
that's also true, right?
Outside of our realm of understanding.
Exactly, right. That's why Chazal say that. That's a good point. That's why Chazal say that when Moshe Rabbeinu, said, "Ask Hashem, Harini as kavodecha, show me your glory." Rambam says that means give me positive knowledge of your existence. But I think, I don't know if it's Rashi there. Chazal somewhere say that he was asking for an answer to tzaddik v'ralo and rasha v'tovlo. Why do bad things happen to good people and vice versa? And like, what I always tell my students in high school when they ask questions of that nature is like, if the answer were a simple answer, then Moshe Rabbeinu wouldn't have been the question that Moshe Rabbeinu still felt like he needed answered when he talked to God. He wouldn't have written Sefer Eov, like you wouldn't need a 42 chapter long book on that topic. So on the one hand, you have like the fact that these are areas that are deep, broad, and like not knowable to even the greatest human beings who ever lived. On the other hand, you have Chazal talking about these things, which in ways that seem to indicate that we should that these should be usable statements and usable teachings. Okay. So that's like the dilemma. Now, I used to think that the way to approach it was to try to master as much as I can about knowledge of hashgachah, and then like approach these statements like from the top down, actually, I don't even know if that's the right way to phrase it, from the top down or the bottom up. But I don't know if that's what Chazal intended. And I'll tell you what happens is that I've seen two versions of how people grapple with this dilemma without knowing it. Okay. One group basically devotes themselves to studying hashgachah and going in depth, and that's great, and gaining knowledge. But then in the meanwhile, the more you learn about hashgachah, the more you realize how little you know. And then these statements become meaningless to you. You don't quote them because you feel like you don't have any like idea about what they're saying. And then they slowly like drift away from you, like floating on the ocean, being carried out to the sea, while you're involved in this knowledge. And I don't think that that's what Chazal intended. Okay. And then the worst mistake, maybe, I don't know, I guess that's going to be part of the question here, is people don't learn at all about hashgachah, and then they just make up their own meanings or take the simple meaning of these statements and then run with that, and don't bother to try to like check and see to what extent are their first impressions of these deep statements in line with actual knowledge, So I wanted to try to like, I wanted to try an attempt. Again, this is Machshavah Lab. This is where we do experiments. Okay. And it could go horribly wrong. We could all end up like, false ideas, but you know what you're signing up for. So I wanted to try to, instead of approaching all of hashgachah and then going down to a particular statement, I want to start with a statement and then try to figure out what the statement means, and then only branch out as needed into deeper, broader questions. Okay. So in other words, our goal is very clear. There's going to be one statement in the Gemara that I want to understand, and we are not going to answer and solve all the problems with hashgachah and Sadiq, Viralo and Rosh V'Tovlo and all this other stuff. We're not going to solve all of that. I want to try to walk away though with an operational, like practical way to view this statement of Chazal about hashgachah. Okay, that's like the goal. And again, there are many shitos on this. I'm not claiming that the views that I'm presenting here are exhaustive by any means. These are just the ones that jumped out to me as making sense. And this is like the way I am currently on this day of May 20th, 2022, understanding this. Okay. And it could fall apart tomorrow.
Just Sadiq Viralo over Rosh V'Tovlo, just that?
No. The statement that we're about to examine about stubbing the toe.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. In fact, I'm going to stay away from the big questions. And that's kind of what attracted me to this statement, because, I mean, hopefully, we make it through life without having real big cases of like horrible tragedies, but we are not going to make it through life without stubbing our toes, So like, I feel like this is something that is like to tackle the big cases of like, premature death and like horrible tragedies. I'm not even going to touch that, but stubbing toes, I feel like is within like the realm of possibility. Okay. So let's see the statement here. All right. Most of this I am not translating on the screen, but the main statement I will translate as we go. Okay. So the statement is in Chulin Daf Zayin Amud Beis. Okay. Which says, V'amar Rabbi Chanina, so Rabbi Chanina said, Ein Adam Nokif Etzba'o Milamata Ela Im Kain Machrizin Alav Milamala. Okay, no person. Now, here's the thing. Okay, Nokif is means to scrape. Okay, again, I'm translating this as stub, but we'll say scrape. No person scrapes. Now, until last Friday, I thought etzba meant finger. Okay, and I thought it was weird that it says like scraping your finger. And then kudos to Isaac Lichter for following up on my statement about that on Friday. He texted me on Monday, and this is something that Isaac is the only one I know who would say this. He says, there's a Mishnah in Ohalos. Okay, I don't know anyone who learns Mishnahs in Ohalos that says Masayim, this is Ohalos 1:8. Yeah, Isaac. You're Isaac, yeah. Masayim v'arbaim u'shmona evarim ba'adam. There are 248 limbs in a person. Shloshim b'pisas ha'regel, 30 of them in the foot. I don't know what part pieces of foot is. Shisha b'chol etzba, 6 on each etzba. Asara b'kursal, 10 on the, I don't know if it's the ankle, shnai. So it's talking about it's breaking down the human being into like all the different, limbs. And it's talking about the anatomy of the foot, and it calls the toes etzba. Here it clearly means toes. Okay. So, and then when I looked at the Mefarshim, even though some take this Gemara to mean finger, then they say it means toe. Now, I don't know if this matters, finger or toe. I just think, again, stubbing your toe is more relatable than scraping your finger. All right, maybe. So no person scrapes his toe below. Also, toe rhymes with below, so it's better reading, unless it is decreed upon from on high. That's the statement. Okay. Shneimar, as it is stated. Okay, now it quotes 2 half psukim. Okay. Me adashem mitzade gaver konanu. Now, what I did is I'm putting, when the Gemara quotes a pasuk and it only quotes part of it, you never really know if it intends for the entire pasuk to be quoted or just the part that it mentions, especially if it quotes the first half of the pasuk. Okay, so I'm just gonna go with what the Gemara said and put the other parts in brackets. So mi Hashem mitzade gaver, from Hashem are the footsteps. From Hashem the footsteps of man are established. V'darko yachpatz, and his way he desires. Okay, that is from Tehillim 37:23, and we'll look at these in context later on. And then it quotes pasuk from Mishlei. Okay, Mi'ad Hashem mitzadei gaver va'adam ma yavin darko. So it doesn't. The Gemara doesn't actually mention this part. From Hashem are the footsteps of man. Va'adam ma yavin darko. And man, what does he understand of his way? Okay, that is Mishlei 20:24. Okay. Now does that? Okay, so just to be clear what I'm doing here. Okay, the Gemara is only quoting from Hashem are the footsteps of man are established, and man, what does he acquire of his? What does he understand of his way? The Gemara is not quoting the parts in brackets here. Okay. Now, just before we read on in the Gemara, do either of these psukim remind you of anything that we say frequently? Mi Hashem mitzadei gaver. Anyone associate anything?
Yeah, Birkat HaShachar.
Yeah, in the Birkat HaShachar, right? In the morning brachos. So if you look at the commentaries on the morning brachos, then I don't know if it's proper to call it a machlokes, but you'll see some Mefarshim say that the source of the bracha is the pasuk in Tehillim, and some say the source of the bracha is the pasuk in Mishlei. Okay, some bring down both. Okay, so it is, if you're making this association, then you're correct. And the reason why I'm highlighting this now is because if we succeed in getting ideas from this shiur, then when you make the brachos hashachar, you should have this in mind. Okay, like these ideas, because it is from these psukim. Okay, but this bolded statement is the one that we're going to try to understand. No person scrapes his toe below unless it is decreed upon from on high. Okay, which makes it sound like, okay, plain shot, when you scrape your toe, God decreed that you should scrape your toe, right? That's plain shot. Okay, but then the Gemara goes on and it says two more statements, okay, which we will also try to understand after we understand the main one, but we're going to translate this now. Amar Rabbi Elazar. So Rabbi Elazar said, Dam nikuf miratze kedam ola. The blood of scraping one's toe, okay, that's he's commenting on the same thing, appeases like the blood of korban ola, okay, which is an elevation, a burnt offering. Let's just say burnt offering, a burnt offering. Okay, so I forgot that I put Rashi. Yeah, Naomi.
It's so interesting they chose ola. I would have guessed
Yes.
chatat.
Okay, right. Because if you think about kapara or whatever, then chatas. So if we forget.
Or asham or something.
Right. So here's the thing. I read a source that answered that question directly, and I want to incorporate it into the shiur, but I was not able to locate it afterwards. I don't remember where I saw it. So if you remind me when we come back to this at the end of the shiur, remind me about that question if I forget, and I think we can answer it. Okay. Cool. But it gets even weirder. Okay. Amar Rava. Okay. Rava said, now, I don't think this is a machlokas. I think this is one of these cases where Rava is qualifying Rabbi Elazar's statement. Okay, Rava said that Rabbi Elazar, I'm going to treat it that way. Rabbi Elazar's statement only applies, okay, bigodel yamin to one's right toe, uvanikuf sheni, and the second scraping, okay, vuhu de ka'azi l'davar mitzvah, and when he is walking to do a mitzvah, okay, yeah, all right. So there you have it here. Okay, so let's just do the Rashis just to get shot here. Okay, Rashi is not going to help us with the idea so much. Okay, so Rashi says nogef is, he quotes the French word for scraping. Okay, I checked that this morning. Okay, machrizin, that it is decreed upon him. So literally, machrizin means announced. Okay, but Rashi says machrizin means gazru alav. It means it is decreed. Okay, so you can, that's why I translate it as decreed. All right, maratze, which says that the blood of scraping was so appeases. Rashi says atones. Okay, Rashi says atones. All right, which is I think how I would have understood anyway, but Rashi confirms that. Godel yamin. Okay, why is it your right toe? So he says mipnei shehu nogif b'koach umitztar harbe. Because you scrape it forcefully and you're in a lot of pain. Okay. Now, this is a slight argument for why etzba might mean finger, because most people are right-handed, and so you're going to be like, using your right hand a lot more, and it's going to be a lot harsher. But the Mefarshim would take this as talking about the toe. Also say that it's talking about the right toe, and that you scrape your right toe harsher. Technically speaking, there is a difference between being right-footed or left-footed. Okay, and I know this because when we were young and we were skiing, my mom decided to be the black sheep and to take snowboarding lessons. And the snowboarding instructor asked her, "Are you right-footed or left-footed?" And she said, "How can I tell?" and the instructor like clandestinely walked behind her and then pushed her. Okay, and she went forward and she shot out her right foot. And he said, "You're right-footed," So apparently, like, there is such a thing. Okay, whatever. It doesn't really matter for our purposes. And then nikuf sheni. So why does it say second scraping? Kodem shinis rape harishon, before the first one has healed. Okay, so the case is you stub your toe, okay, or you scrape your toe, and it's healing, so it's still like wounded, and then you scrape it again. Okay. Okay. So I guess let's do what we usually do here. Even though I think like our it's going to be fairly fairly obvious here. Okay, what are our questions on this Gemara that we're going to try to answer? What questions do you have? Questions and problems.
Well, I mean, I think the big one might be, what are the, like on a hashgachah level, what are they trying to tell us with this idea of people don't scrape their toes?
Exactly.
The second scraping only.
Chazal, that's the major question, right? What are Chazal trying to teach us about how we view toe scraping? Okay. So
which is, I'm assuming that's a metaphor for minor mishaps in life.
Yeah, I think it's so here, well, here's the interesting thing, right? So you would think that like that no person scrapes his toe. So certainly if he breaks his arm, right? Like, so you think that this is just like an example of like a minor mishap. But then the weird thing is the specificity of Rava's statement here of your right toe, second scraping and walking to do a mitzvah does make it sound more specific. Now you can still say that he's still like showing you a category, but it does, like, the specificity is a little weird, right?
Yeah.
But I think this is a perfect way to formulate the question because, like I've said this in my Mishlei shiur a lot, but like, you should always like formulate your questions and you should be as clear as possible, but sometimes being too precise in a question is going to limit the scope of what you're looking for. And I think for something like this, then you should do like what Naomi did with her question, cast a wide net. Like, what are they trying to teach us? So I think that's a good way to frame it here.
I have some ideas about all three of those, but
okay. So we'll list the questions first. Yeah. Okay. What other particular questions do we have here?
The Ola versus Chatat or Asham.
Okay. Yeah. Correct. Yeah. You don't have to remind me now that I'm typing it out. So what? Why? Like an Ola, okay, as opposed to a Chatas or Asham. And I assume you said Chatas or Asham because those are more associated with sins that need atonement, right?
Right.
Which are more associated with sins that need atonement. Yeah.
Also, I don't know, what is it about these psukim that support the thesis?
Okay, right. So that is another question. How do both what do these psukim contribute to the thesis? Okay, and then why are both necessary, right? And the funny thing, so whenever two psukim are quoted, you should always ask why are both necessary. But the strange thing here is like this: wouldn't it have been just nice? So you see, again, he's only quoting the phrase here. Hold on. Mehashem mitzade gaver konanu. Now, couldn't he have just quoted the entire pasuk in Mishlei, Mehashem mitzade gaver v'adam ma yavin darka, and just omitted Tehillim? Like the first half of the pasuk in Mishlei, which he doesn't quote, is almost word for word the part of the Tehillim that he does quote. The only word that's missing is konanu. But is that really so important? Why not just quote Mishlei? Right? That would have been great, So it does seem like both of these are necessary, and he doesn't want to use the first half of the Mishlei pasuk. He wants to get that from Tehillim. Very, very strange.
Could you restate in the Mishlei and Tehillim which are the phrases that are overlapping?
Yeah. So the phrase that overlaps the pasuk, he does the phrase. Sorry, the part that he quotes from Tehillim is from Hashem the footsteps of man are established. And then the part he doesn't quote from Mishlei is from Hashem are the footsteps of man. From Hashem are the footsteps of man. Okay. So like, in other words, he could have just quoted the very similar first half of Mishlei, which is very similar to the part of Tehillim that he does quote, and then just delete the Tehillim. Just have the entire pasuk in Mishlei. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thanks.
Okay. Okay. And then obviously the question is, we'll just put this here. What what is each of the three Amoraim, I think these are Amoraim, teaching us? Okay, so like included in that is like, why does Rabbi Elazar say right toe, second scraping, walking to do a mitzvah? So I think these are going to be the main questions. Okay, so here's the thing. Let me just think about how I want to proceed here, because oh yeah, so okay, I'm before we will open the doors to like theorizing in a second, but sometimes you are learning a source, you're learning a certain text, and you happen to be learning something else, and they coincide in a way that like flint that makes sparks fly. So I happen to be learning, okay, I'm gonna actually, I always like to share interesting books I'm reading. This book, which is recommended to me via David Rindy, recommended via Rabbi Ginsburg, is called Maimonides, Life and Thought by Moshe Halbertal. I think it's originally written in Hebrew, and this is the English translation. It's called The Life and Thought of Maimonides. Really, really, really good overview. I quoted this in the shiur about the D'Rabbanans. Really good overview of like all of like what the Rambam did that was like original. So I happened to be reading this on the day that I learned this, and I'm in the last chapters, which is about the Mor Nevuchim, and the Rambam and the author brings up a Rambam in the Mor Nevuchim, which is very, I'm going to call it controversial, not in the sense that I think people actually like, I don't know if this is controversial in fact, but you're going to read it and you're going to be like, it's going to make you uncomfortable maybe. Okay. And it should. All right. And it's uncomfortable. It's possibly dangerous. Okay. But we got to live on the edge in Machshavah Lab here. Okay. So just note that this is going to open a can of worms, and we're going to let the worms frolic in terms of like, we're not going to like try to like address this topic per se, but we're just going to use it as a framework for approaching the Gemara. Okay. So you've been warned. All right. Rambam in the Mor Nevuchim 3:28 says like this, and I'm going to use my slightly modified, in the Hebrew here I have the Kathach translation, but I'm using my slightly modified Pines translation, which I modified myself. Okay. So it says like this: among the things to which your attention ought to be directed is that you should know that in regard to the correct beliefs through which the ultimate perfection may be obtained, the Torah has communicated only their end, and has called us to hold by them in a general manner. That is, to believe in the existence of Hashem, may he be exalted, his oneness, his knowledge, his power, his will, and his eternity. All of these are the ultimate ends, which can be made clear in detail and through definitions only after one knows many ideas. That's not controversial. So I'll summarize this in English, okay? How many psukim in the Torah say that God is one? One. Okay. Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. It's the only pasuk that explicitly says that God is one. Okay, so but how much writing would you need in order to like guide someone through all the proofs of that? Probably a lot. Okay, look at Rabbeinu Bachya and Bakuda and the Shara Yichud. A lot of proofs about God's oneness, right? Similarly, that God created the universe. Oh, he doesn't say that here. Okay, but whatever. God's eternality, his knowledge, his power, his will. The Torah will only state the conclusions, but not how you get there. And I don't know if the Rambam says this, but I know other Rishonim say there's a very simple reason for this. Why would the Torah not spell out all the philosophical proofs in the actual Torah B'Ksav for these fundamental points? Why do you think?
Because it's a different thing if you have to learn it.
What do you mean?
I think when you think it through, like if somebody just tells it to you, you're not taking it on authority. You're supposed to like understand it.
Okay, right. Okay, that's definitely true. Yeah, that could be a reason. Anyone else?
Can you say the question again? I'm sorry.
Yeah, the question is like this. Yeah, that's sure. The question is, the Torah just says God is one. Okay, it does not walk you through the proofs of God's oneness. And the question is, why not? Why doesn't the Torah say that? State these.
Imagine that. I don't know how accessible. I don't know how accessible you think that is for everyone.
I that's exactly the answer, right? Is that this is not something which is accessible, right? So what's going to happen is the people who are able to do this will do this on their own, okay? Or this will be part of their Torah Shabbat Peh, not halakhic Torah Shabbat Peh, but like their Rebbe will teach this to them at their developmentally appropriate level, so they don't need it in the psukim. And the average person is not going to gain anything from it. In fact, it could be detrimental. In fact, I know where this is said. This is a funny machlokus. It's funny. I think it's funny between the Ibn Ezra and the Kuzari Rabbi Yehuda Halevi about why it says, Anochi Hashem Elokecha asher hotzicha me'eretz Mitzrayim mibeis avadim, right? Why does God introduce himself as the God who took you out of Egypt, as opposed to the God who created the heavens and the earth? So the Rabbi Yehuda Halevi says it's because it's a higher level to believe in God based on the direct encounter with Hashem in Yetzias Mitzrayim. Okay, Ibn Ezra and the Torah is talking to everybody, and it's saying this is the highest level. Ibn Ezra says no, it's a higher level to say that to relate to God through Ma'aseh Bereshis and through knowledge of science and metaphysics. But because the Torah is talking to everybody, then it's not going to say that, because not everyone can access that. You need the chacham to you need to bring a certain level of chacham to get this through knowledge of creation. Okay, so that's similar here. Okay, so this is a not controversial point. Okay, Torah states these beliefs, and these are true, but the Torah will not walk you through the proofs. Okay, here's the controversial part. Hold on. In the same way, the Torah calls us to adopt certain belief in which is necessary for the sake of political or ethical welfare. Now, remember, Rambam wrote the Mor Nevuchim in Arabic, which was translated into Hebrew, and the Kafach translation translates it as Betikinus Hamatzavim Hamadiniim, in the perfection of actually another word, social welfare. Welfare. I don't mean that in like a being dependent on welfare thing. This is a hard phrase to translate into English. Basically, in terms of for the sake of interpersonal societal relations. Okay, such, for instance, is our belief that he, may he be exalted, is angry with those who disobey him, and that it is therefore necessary to fear him and to dread him and to take care not to disobey. Okay, so I'm gonna label these two types of beliefs, and then we're gonna read the Rambam summary, and then we'll talk about it. This is called we'll call the first one true beliefs, and the second one as necessary beliefs. Okay, true meaning that the purpose of teaching the Torah, teaching these things, is because they are true, and knowing these ideas is part of human perfection intrinsically. Versus necessary beliefs are things which the beliefs that the Torah is promoting, not because they are true, but because they help society. Okay, so he's going to now restate this, and he's going to give slightly more examples here. Okay, this is at the end of the same chapter. Understand what we have said regarding beliefs. Sometimes a mitzvah communicates a correct belief, which is the one and only thing aimed at, as for instance, the belief in the oneness and eternity of the deity and in his not being physical. And in some cases, the belief is necessary for the abolition of injustice or for the acquisition of a noble moral quality, as for instance, the belief that he, may he be exalted, is angered by those who do injustice, according to what is said, my anger shall blaze, etc. And as the belief that he, may he be exalted, responds instantaneously to the prayer of someone wronged or deceived. So this is about the, I think, abusing widows and orphans. It shall be that when he will cry out to me, I will listen, for I am gracious. Or maybe this is about abusing the poor. Hold on, let me just see the actual pasuk here so I don't misquote it. Shemos 22, 20, what did I say? 26. So it says, oh no, this is abusing the poor. That if you keep his security deposit, then what? Oh, was the thing I was reading from misquoting, or did I mistype it? Oh no, there's this. I just quote, yeah. Im ane sa'ane oso. So this is, sorry. Kol almana v'yasom lo sa'anun. Do not afflict any widow or orphan. Im ane sa'ane oso. If you shall surely afflict him or her. Ki im sa'og yitzak elai. And if he cries out to me, to God, shamo eshmatakaso, I will listen to his outcry. V'chara api v'harakti eschem bechara. Then I will become angry and I will kill you by the sword. V'hayu neshechem almanos uvnechem yasomin. And your wives will become widows and your children will become orphans. Okay, huge threat. Okay, so again, the categories here are certain beliefs the Torah commands or teaches. When he says commands, I don't think he's just restricting this to like Tarek mitzvos. Certain beliefs the Torah says, believe this because it is true. Other beliefs the Torah commands not because it's true, but because it is necessary for society. So God is one. That's why the Torah wants us to believe in it, because it's true. God did create the universe. That's why the Torah wants us to believe in it. Okay, is God going to kill your kids and your wife if you abuse an orphan or widow? Not necessarily. Okay, in fact, we see many people who abuse orphans and widows and do not get killed, right? But the Torah is saying that because people should be afraid that God is going to do that, and that will stop him from abusing the orphans and widows. Similarly, is God going to get angry at you if you do something? God doesn't have emotions, right? This is the whole point of the Moreh Nevuchim, to show that God has no human qualities whatsoever. God doesn't have actual emotions. Do we believe in reward and punishment? Yes. Okay. But God doesn't get angry. He doesn't, V'chara apo, his nostrils don't flare because doesn't have nostrils and can't change. But by teaching this, then it instills a fear of God in people and prevents them from sinning. Okay. So again, that's the can of worms, okay? Because now the question is, well, how do we know which beliefs the Torah is teaching because it's true? And how do we know which beliefs the Torah is teaching because they're necessary? How could the Torah teach things that are not strictly speaking true? Yeah, question?
Yeah, I have a question.
Okay,
you want
to go? Yes, go ahead. Go ahead.
I'm just want to clarify. You're saying
Sure.
the can of worms, I mean, it's saying something about Sparvonish, right? It's just not direct. I mean, I think I'm not quite grasping what the can of worms is. Maybe because I already don't think everything like that is literal, but I'm not sure what the can of worms is.
So I think the what do you call, the example of the orphans and widows is the clearest one, which is that, a person will read the Torah and it says explicitly, if you, let's say I go to a newsie, okay, and I raise his the price of his papes, right? And what happens is, he cries out to Hashem, and if I take the pasuk, at face value, it's saying that Hashem is going to kill my kids and then kill me, and then my kids will become orphans, right? And the Rambam is saying that's not true, right? I mean, it could happen, but it's certainly not like a law that's how Hashem does it. And so then why does the Torah teach it? In order to get people to stop abusing orphans. But when it says God is one, that is true, and the Torah is telling it not to get you to do something, but because it is a fundamental truth, and you are a Tzelem Elokim, and our purpose in life is to have correct knowledge of reality. And the can of worms is how do you know which is which?
Rambam is saying that specific example is not true. That's what you're bringing up.
Well, he's giving two examples. He gives the example of God getting angry, and he gives the example of the orphans and widows, but he's saying that these are two examples of a broader category. And so now anytime the Torah tells us something, we have to ask, is this a true belief or is this a necessary belief? Is it telling it to us because it is true, or is it telling it to us in this way in order to bring about something specific in the way we interact with each other?
Right, but are you saying that there's no truth to that? I think I'm still not clear. I mean, there's still some kind of Skarva involved, right?
There's still Skarva, right?
Not like a one-to-one correspondence like that.
Right. I'm gonna leave that question unanswered. Okay. All I'm saying is that the Rambam says there are these two categories, and maybe we'll answer that in the course of what we're gonna do today. But I'm not addressing that topic specifically. It's just that the Rambam is emphatic. There are these two categories. Okay. And again, I'm not saying it's not a good question. I'm saying I'm not going to answer that question because I don't know the answer to it, and I'm only borrowing this distinction for our purposes here. Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah. Naomi Mann, did you have another question?
Sorry, no, that was. Oh,
okay,
Naomi Mann.
I saw Naomi Mann unmute also though. So
yeah, no, it's okay. I'll hold up.
Okay.
I might have a question, but I'll hold up. Okay, thanks.
Okay. All right. So why am I bringing this up? Because I happened to be doing this when I did the Gemara, and now my question is like this. Okay. Rambam was talking about what God does in the Torah, in the Chumash itself, but certainly Chazal would do this as well. Okay. Chazal model their teachings after the Torah. Okay. So my question is like this. Are we to treat this statement, okay, or these statements, I should say, these statements as true beliefs? Oops, why did it make it smaller? True beliefs or necessary beliefs or something in between? Okay. Is in between one word? I always forget that. No, it's not. In between. Okay. So in other words, like this, when Chazal say, no person scrapes his toe below unless it's decreed upon from on high, is that a statement that again, we're going to obviously interpret this in a second, but does it mean that so to speak, the council of angels is sitting there and they say, oh, time for Rabbi Shneiwes to stub his toe. I issue forth a decree from Hashem that you're gonna stub your toe, or is it that no, this is not necessarily a true statement, but it prompts a certain way of of decision making or behavior or thinking, and it's useful for me to think this way, even if it's not strictly speaking true. Or do you think those are the same thing? Which I feel like, you know, that's where Este's question is coming from, even though that's not necessarily the same question. In other words, you know, it's true what they're saying, just not in the most literal sense possible. But then I go back and I say, well, then why is the Rambam making the distinction? All the beliefs, all the statements of the Torah are true in the sense that they're all guiding you towards something real.
Right, but the same way we say like miyad chazakah, like
Right.
Torah b'lashon bnei adam. Like if you
Yeah.
just take the pshat of echad, it's not
Right.
untrue, even though you might not have the most sophisticated idea of what echad means.
Right, right.
If you take a literal understanding of Hashem getting angry, then that's
Yeah.
actually problematic.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. Okay, now here's the thing. Okay, I'm a little in conflict about what to do here because we're now done with the question portion of the shiur. Okay, and as much as I usually like to have everyone to hear what you guys think on the answers, I am concerned about time. Okay, especially because some of us are in Israel, not us, me, but I hope you're okay if I proceed to show you what my findings are, and then if you have other answers afterwards, we could always do that in the portion of the shiur, like at the end. Okay, I just want to make sure that we get through the main part of the shiur now. Okay, so pardon me.
I'm sorry, can I just restate the question, just make sure I'm following
Sure.
up to now? So
Yeah.
the thing is that the question is, if there's two different types, there's beliefs that are true that the Torah tells us,
Yeah.
and things that are necessary, meaning we need, okay, I think I'm just like not clear. Necessary meaning we need them for society,
Right.
but they're not, if you're taking them literally, I think I'm just foggy on something. I'm sorry, I have a lot going on also, but I just really want to understand before we proceed.
Yeah, and that's the question that I am not, I don't have a stance on, okay, which is that Rambam is saying that the Torah teaches certain things only because they're necessary for society, okay, and the nafkamina is like this. Here's a good nafkamina, this will help, okay. Let's say we lived in a society where people did not abuse orphans and widows. So then there would be no need for Hashem to teach us the idea that if an orphan and widow cries out because of abuse, then God will kill the man and make his wife a widow and his children into orphans. But God would always teach the idea of Hashem Echad, because that's a true belief that we need no matter what.
There's also an element of mida keneged mida on the psychological level could be a message here.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. There could be different things. Yeah, but
okay. So you're saying that there are ideas that it's not so much that they're necessarily objectively true. They're ideas that we need to have in order to have society run, or you know, other things like principles of life that are taught through these things.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep. Okay.
This is like, just quick, this is like the eye for an eye thing. Like we have that, and it's not really true, but it's to give us a feeling.
Okay, yeah, it's slightly different there because we don't want people to ever believe that eye for an eye is literal. We want them to get like a moral message from it, but we don't want anyone to believe. If you believe that an eye for eye is literal, then that's like a denial of Torah Sheba'al Peh. Here, it sounds like the Rambam saying we want people to be afraid of abusing orphans because they don't want to risk God's wrath being awakened and killing them, killing them and making this. So I think in other words, the Torah is promoting these beliefs because it wants the average person to believe that God is going to kill people who abuse orphans and widows. Yeah, I see the analogy though. Okay, so let's try to, again, keep our eye on this main question, which is what are Chazal trying to teach us through this, okay? And we're going to focus on only the first of the statements right now, okay? So the best commentary I found here is the Meiri, okay? And this is not a comprehensive thing. This is just what I found. Okay, so he says like this, on commentary on that Gemara, Miyasodi HaTorah hu lios ha'adam misbonin umakir. It is one of the foundations of Torah that a person should contemplate and recognize shekol ma she'ye'era lo, everything that occurs to him, me'eze min shel tzara, no matter what type of affliction, hakol b'mishpat, everything is in line with justice. Mitzad onesh mishpate yashro yisbarach. It's all with justice via God's upright judgments. V'hu sha'amru, and this is what Chazal meant when they said, "Ein adam nokif etzba'o milamata ela im kin machrizna alav milamala," that no person stubs his toe below, scrapes his toe below, unless it is decreed upon from on high. V'yavo mizeh, here's the key part. V'yavo mizeh she'yifashvish b'ma'asav, and he will come from this to analyze his actions. v'yashuv midrachav, and to do teshuva from his ways, harayim, from his evil ways. V'hu she'amru, and this is what they meant when they said, dam nikuf kedam ola, that the blood of scraping is like the blood of an ola. V'amar derech tzachus, and they said by way of derech tzachus, like means like literally means like eloquence, but I think here it means like a catchy example, okay, for lack of a better term. Begoldel yamin, your right toe, mipnei shehu holech lo b'mihirus, because you walk quickly, benokef b'koach, and you strike it forcefully, umitzara harbe, and it really hurts. V'kol shekein b'nikuf sheni, all the more so with the second scraping or stubbing, ad shelo nisrab harishon, when the first one hasn't healed yet, shumachi b'yoser, which pains him even more. When I was talking about this with Isaac said there's something inexplicably funny about a rishon explaining how stubbing your toe works. And then he added saying, I feel like stubbing your toe is like a modern innovation, but evidently it's not, So, okay. So that's what the Meiri has to say. Okay, so I think this answers a bunch of our questions. Okay, so let's go back to our questions here. I'll just summarize first. He says, you should, a foundation of Torah is to know that everything that happens is in line with God's justice. And when something happens to you, then you should analyze your actions and do tshuva. That's what it means that the blood of scraping is like the blood of an ola. And it uses this example because it really, really hurts. Okay, so what do you think? So far, okay, do you think he's saying that this is a true belief or a necessary belief? In other words, is he saying that God made you stub your toe to punish you for a sin? Or is Rabbi Chanina saying this because it is a beneficial thing to think because it gets you to do tshuva?
B.
Kind of in the middle.
B. You think it's a middle, you say?
Yeah, like
Okay, good. I think both of those are acceptable answers. Can you elaborate what you mean by the middle?
as in God doesn't make you stub your toe, but God doesn't stop you from stubbing your toe. It
Okay.
fits with divine justice.
Okay, that's very good. Okay, so anyone else want to say?
Yeah, I was going to say, like, I wanted a third category also, that
Yeah.
you can hear it, and depending on how you understand it, like if you walk away from this thinking, there are angels up there writing out little proclamations about who should stub their toe and when, then it's more the second category, kind of keep people in line. But if you understand, there's this system of hashgachah, and depending on where I am in my personal development, and Hashem wants me to be mefashpesh b'ma'asai, etc., then it's more the first statement.
Okay, very good. And the reason why it's very good is because it also perfectly segues into the next source. Okay, so just to reiterate here, at the very least, he's saying that it is a necessary belief, that if you think this when you stub your toe, you will come to do teshuvah, and that will be good for you. So it prompts good behavior, even if it weren't true, okay? And by the way, just to clarify here, and I think most of us in this Zoom room probably assume this anyway, it's when Rabbi Elazar says, dam nikuf merate kedam ola, that the blood of scraping atones for you like the blood of an ola, it's not an automatic thing, right? It's not like boom, you get kapara. Meiri explicitly says that it has to prompt an introspection, and then that will make you do tshuva. So in other words, it's like the dam ola in that it is a vehicle for teshuva, which gets you kapara. It's not automatic kapara. In fact, ola itself is not automatic kapara, because if you don't do tshuva, on any korban, if you don't do tshuva and you bring the korban does nothing for you, right? So it's only if you do tshuva. So it's a prompt to do tshuva, okay? Now, before we explore this other answer of that this is a hybrid category or it could be either, I want to play out the necessary belief thing using another Mishnah, which I was going to give a whole shiur on this, but I'm just going to localize it here. Okay, this is a creepy Mishnah in Pirkei Avos. Afhu ra'agu golas achas tzafa al pnei hamayim. Okay, so Hillel is talking about Hillel. Hillel saw a skull floating on the water. V'amrar la, and he said to it. So this is the Hamlet scene, but with water. Al da'atift atifuch v'sof mitifayach yutufun. So the literal translation, most literal, is because he's talking to the guy, because you drowned others, you were drowned. And in the end, those who drowned you are going to be drowned. Okay. A lot of the Mepharshim say, well, it can't mean drowned, because when you drown, your head doesn't pop off. Okay, like that just doesn't happen. So they say that that it means because you were made to float. Okay, like, and really he got killed by getting decapitated. Okay, but like, okay, whatever. So if you take this literally, it sounds like he's saying that this guy drowned someone, so he died by drowning, and the people who drown him are going to get punished also. Okay. Now there are many interpretations of this. Again, I have a whole shiur on this. I gave a shiur on this at Lomdaha last year. I don't know if it's recorded, but we'll see. Okay. Now the meiri there. So it sounds like a really, really like mita connected mita type thing, right? Like measure for measure, you drown others, you're going to get drowned. Okay. But here's what the meiri. So the meiri on that Mishnah refers us to an earlier Mishnah, and I don't know what it has to do with the context, but in the earlier Mishnah, this is what he says. Etc. He gives a different reading of it. Okay, but he says like this: Hakavana. The intent in this is like as follows: Laha'amin. You should believe al hamaoros v'hasibos, on instances and on causes, shehim kulam mitzad ha'onesh, that they are all by way of punishment, lo b'mikre, not by chance. V'shepulos hara yashuvim barosh oseim, and that evil actions return to the heads of those who did them. Ka'amru Rabbeinu Zal Sota Ches Amud Beis b'midash adamodid bat modedim lo. That Chazal say that with the measuring stick by which a person is measured. Sorry, the measuring stick by which a person measures, he is measured, which we say that in a much smoother way by saying mita connected mita, but this is the statement that it comes from. It also says in a pasuk, the actions of man are repaid to him. It says in another pasuk, to give man according to the fruit of his actions, and according to his ways and according to the fruit of his actions, he will eat. And then he clarifies, he says, even though the first guy was fit to be punished, the second one was not forced to punish him. Rather, he made a free bechira decision, and therefore he is fit to be punished also. We're not going to get into how this works with bechira. So here he says like this. He says, again, the key point I'm taking out of this is he's saying, you should believe, the point of this is that you should believe that everything comes, all causes, meaning like bad causes and stuff, and all bad occurrences come by way of punishment, and they're not chance, and that you're going to get what you deserve. Okay, now again, here you could read this both ways. You could say that you should believe this because it is true, or you should believe this because it will get you to do tshuva, and it'll reinforce your idea that there is reality of justice. We do hold that God is just, but he's saying, in other words, you suffering this fate might not have been God giving you a mita connected mita punishment in the in this direct sense, but it's, if you believe that drowning someone will cause you to be drowned, then it's going to be beneficial for society. Okay, so that's the meiri. There is going to be one more meiri that's going to complete the meiri's picture, but now I want to segue into what Brooke and Naomi were saying about how we should view these things. And this is, many of you will probably have learned this before, but this is always good to revisit every once in a while. This is the famous Sefer HaChinuch on the mitzvah of ma'akeh. Okay, so if you haven't learned this, then you're in for a treat. Okay, this is the one of the key places where the Sefer HaChinuch explains his shita on hashgachah pratis. Okay, so here's what he says. So the mitzvah is lahasir hamichsholim v'hanigafim mikol mishkanoseno. The mitzvah is to remove all stumbling blocks and causes of harm from our dwellings. And regarding this, it says in Devarim 22:8, make a fence around your roof. And the idea is hu shenivne kir saviv hagagos. We should make a fence around our roofs, v'saviv haboros, and around pits, v'hashichim, and ditches, v'domehem, and other things like that, kadesh lo tikashel beria lipol bahem omehem, so that no one will stumble into them or because of them. Uvichlal mitzvah. Included in this mitzvah is livnos ulasakin kol kotel, is to build and repair every wall, v'chol getter, and every fence, sheyeh karov lavo takala mimenu, which has a likely disaster to come from it. V'zeh shehizkir hakasav legagecha, and the fact that the pasuk singled out around your roof, dibur hakasav behoveh. That's just because the Torah is talking about the common case, because most people have roofs. L'lashon sifrei v'asisa ma'akeh mitzvah saseh. So in other words, halakhically, even though the pasuk only says make a ma'akeh around your roof, it really means repair or build precautionary like fences around anything that could cause people to get harmed. Okay, that's the mitzvah. Okay, but now he explains the reason for it, and you have to admire this on two levels. One is the ideas he's saying, but secondly, the rhetorical strategy he uses here. Okay, remember, he's writing to his son. Okay, and now we don't know how old his son is. We get the impression that like his son must be like around bar mitzvah age or so, maybe a little older, maybe a little younger, because he says basically like, I want my son to read this while he's in shul on Shabbos, to like stay out of trouble, So like, note how he's going to reframe certain things. Okay, I'll just say that. All right, here's what he says. Mishorashei mitzvah, at the roots of the mitzvah, meaning the reason for the mitzvah is as follows. Lefi she'im heyos Hashem Baruch Hu mashgiach beprate bnei Adam. Even though God has hashgachah pratis, specific individual providence over people, v'yodea kol ma'aseim, and he knows all of their actions, v'chol asher yikra lahem, and everything that happens to them, tov or ra, good or bad, because a raso of mitzvah is according to God's decree and according to his mitzvah, lefi zechusan o chiyuvan, according to their merit and liability. As our Gemara says, that no one stubs his toe below unless it is decreed upon from on high. So even though that's true, nevertheless, a person needs to guard himself from the chance occurrences that are present in the world. Okay. Because God created his world and built it upon the foundations of the pillars of nature. V'gazar, and God decreed, that fire should burn, and water should extinguish a blaze. And likewise, nature necessitates, that if a large stone falls on a man's head, it will splatter his brains. Or if a person falls from a roof, a tall roof, to the ground, he will die. God was gracious in creating the bodies of man, and he breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, which is the Tzelem Elokim, ba'alas da'as, and made man into a rational creature, a creature with knowledge. Lishmor haguf, to protect his body, mikol pega, to protect it from every occurrence. V'nasan shnehem, and he gave them both, hanefesh v'gufa, the soul and its body, besoch galgal hayesodos. He placed both of them in the sphere of the elements, meaning in the physical world. V'hema yinahagum v'yifalu ba'am peulos, and nature will act on man's body and soul, and it'll do its actions. And once God subordinated the body of man to nature, because that's how God's chachma decreed, because man is physical, God commanded us to guard ourselves against chance occurrences. Because nature will act upon a person and will do its actions on a person if he doesn't guard himself from it. Okay. So if we pause here, and there is more, but if we pause here and say, if let's say someone falls, let's say I don't make a makkah and someone falls off of my roof, okay, and then gets killed, right? Did God decree that or not? What would you say based on the Sefer Chinuch?
I'd say God didn't decree that it shouldn't happen.
Okay, so that's like Brooke's answer, right? God didn't decree that it shouldn't happen.
And God decreed that the laws of nature should run, and they are.
Exactly. And God decreed that the laws of nature should run, and they are. Okay. And is this, I guess, okay, when he says here, let's just go back the way he started off. Even though God is mashgiach, God has hashgachah pratis, beprate bnei Adam, on people's, on human beings, v'yodea kol ma'aseim, and knows all their actions, v'chol asher yikra lahem tov or ra, because a raso of mitzvaso lefi zechusan o chiyuvan, and everything that happens to them is for good and for bad, is by his decree, in accordance with their merit or liability, okay? And then he quotes our Gemara, nevertheless, a person needs to guard himself from chance occurrences that are present in the world. So when this person got hurt, then was that in line, in what sense was that in line with God's decree based on his merit or liability?
It's like that joke when the guy said, I trust in God. He said, I sent you a boat, I sent you a helicopter.
Yeah, right.
All those things.
Okay, so you could give that answer. Now that would work if the guy himself didn't, like if he got injured because of his failure to build a makkah. So for example, I would say like this: did God decree that this guy should get hurt? Well, God said, "The asisa ma'age l'gagacha." Wait, I got to quote the exact pasuk. Hold on, so I don't quote it out of context. 22:8. Yeah. When you build a new house and you make a roof, you shall make a roof for your fence. And there will not be blood in your house when a person falls from it. So this guy ignored God's commandment and he got what he deserved, right? Because the pasuk says that you're going to get hurt, right? Now it's like the other analogy that is given, which I feel like I quoted in a recent shiur, I don't remember the shiur, is like, if you have a gardener who designs a garden, makes a path and lines it with thorn bushes and says, stay on the path. And if you choose to not stay on the path and you get cut, don't blame the gardener. He told you, he gave a path and he said, follow the path and don't go off the path. And if you do, you're going to get hurt. So this guy didn't follow the path and got hurt. But what about if it's someone else who got hurt because of this guy's negligence? Right, like what happened last year in Meron, right? Is that you had all the people who gathered in Meron and the proper safety measures were not put in place, and tons of people died and got hurt, right? So I understand if the guy who set it up gets hurt, but what if that guy wasn't there and all these seemingly innocent people got hurt, right?
I mean, that's a much more extreme version of stubbing.
It's a much more extreme version of stubbing your toe, correct? Yeah. So here's what the Sefer Chinuch goes on to say. We can't fully explain it until we get to this next part. So this is the last paragraph here. There are certain people, certain members of humankind that God desires their glory or their honor, according to their great piety, and whose souls cling to God, blessed is He. These are the great pious people that are men of reputation, like the Avos, V'Hagdoshim, who are great and holy, V'Harbe min Habanim, and many of their offspring, Shayu Acharem, who follow them, Daniel, Hanan, Mishael, Azariah, V'Damim, like Daniel and his buddies, and those like them, Shemasar Hakel Hatava B'Yadehem, that God entrusted nature into their hand. Now that's an opposite of God subjugated our bodies to nature, and here he's saying that God subjected nature to them. Uvatchilasam Haya Hateva Adon Elam. And in the beginning, nature was a master of them. Uvasofan, but in the end, Lagodot his alus nafsham nahafachu shiyuhem adonim al hateva. Due to their great level, then it was reversed, and they become masters over nature. Kasher Yadanu ba'Avram Avinu shehipiluhu b'kivshan eish v'lo huzak. Like according to Abraham in the Midrash, that he was thrown into a fiery oven and not damaged. Barbas hachasidim and his karim. Okay, this is actually false. Okay, this is either a typo or like whatever. He says, like the four Hasidim that were mentioned, Daniel, Hanan, Mishael, and Azariah, Shesamu Osam Lago Atun Nura Yakitata Se'ar Roshan Lo Ischarich, that they were thrown into a fiery furnace and the hair in their head was not singed. That's false because it was only three of them that were thrown into the fire. Daniel was not thrown into the fire. Okay, so it's only Hanan, Mishael, and Azariah. I saw another version of the Sefer Chinuch where it changes 4 to 3. Okay, that's more accurate. Uvrov b'nei Adam, but the majority of people, b'chetam, Lozachu el hamal hagadol lazos, but most people, due to their sin, do not merit this high level. Va'alkein, therefore, titzavenu haTorah lishmor mishkanosenu u'mikomosenu l'ba yikrenu maves b'pshiosenu v'lo nisaki nafshosenu al smach hanetz. Therefore, the Torah commanded us to guard our dwellings and our places so that nothing unfortunate happens to us through our negligence, and we should not endanger ourselves by relying on a miracle. Va'amru zechron livracha, and Chazal say, anyone who relies on a miracle, a miracle is not done for him. And for this reason, you'll see in the many places in the psukim, even when the Jews were going to do a mitzvah war, al pi Hashem, based on God's commandments, they still strategized for war and armed themselves and waged war as if they were relying on nature completely, because they're not on the level to get like a direct protection. That's what is fit for us to do according to what we mentioned. Anyone who does not differ with the truth due to evil of heart will agree to this. So in light of this, saying that there's a level of hashgachah where God will protect you from natural occurrences, but the rest of us have to take precautions. And even when people in Chumash were following war orders directly from Hashem, they still had to prepare as if they were relying on nature completely, right? So in light of that, what do we make of a case where someone else dies as a result of a negligent person's negligence?
I mean, why is it any different than somebody dying just because there was a hurricane or something?
Right. It shouldn't be different, right? So in other words, the most you can say is like this, which is that evidently they were not protected by the hashgachah, right? Now, is it because they weren't on the level? Is it because, we also know that there's very many rules of hashgachah, laws of hashgachah, like, once the destroyer is unleashed, then it doesn't differentiate between tzaddik and rasha. So like Rabbi Akiva dying is not necessarily as a result of he deserved that punishment because of his own sins, but the destroyer was unleashed. It could be because of the sins of the people. Many complicated complications here. But on a minimal level, then the Sefer Chinuch is saying majority of us are not on the level to be protected miraculously from common occurrences. So everything that happens to us is in line with God's justice, even if we don't understand it. And therefore, though, we need to protect ourselves and take precautions. So I think that's like the hybrid answer that Brooke and Naomi Dardick were giving, which is that either it is a true idea that either stubbing your toe is decreed from on high is a necessary idea in that it prompts teshuvah, but it's also a true idea in the sense that you wouldn't have stubbed your toe if it weren't for the fact that you were, on a certain level of hashgachah where you didn't merit having toe protectors, divine toe protectors, right? Or it's that each person who stubs their toe, it is being decreed upon them for one of two reasons, right? Either this is a tzaddik who God is giving this to him as a miraculous punishment, or it's an average person who is, because of the chait, is not deserving of that protection, and toe stubbing is part of the laws of nature, that you do, and that's part of the decrees of God. Just like the Sefer Chinuch said, just like fire burns by God's decree and brains splatter by God's decree, so do toes get stuck by God's decree. So it is a true statement as well. Okay, it depends on how you what you take it to mean when you say it was decreed from on high. And I think this is part of Chazal's ingenious strategy, which they borrow from the Torah, which is using deliberately ambiguous language that the average person will internalize this and say, oh, God made this happen to me, and it'll prompt them to do tshuva, and they won't necessarily know these ideas. And then as you gain more sophistication, you'll understand, okay, fine, I understand that there's different levels of hashgachah, and like I can be protected and I can't, but still at the end of the day, like, I should do tshuva and I should use this as a prompt for tshuva, and you'll grow with a statement in line with your developmental level. That's why I do think that the idea that it's not strictly speaking a true belief it's true in that it points you to something that is true, and it's necessary in that it points you to something which is useful. But can you classify it like as one or the other? I don't think so. I think it serves both. Any questions on that?
Yeah, I have a question.
Sure.
Are you saying that maybe there's no distinction, but I'm kind of like, is it that we don't know how to categorize it, so we can kind of assume, but objectively it is being categorized as one or the other, or we just don't even know? Does that make sense?
I think you could view it in several ways. Okay, I'll give you a. Okay, I'll answer several ways in several ways. On the one hand, you can say we don't know whether this is an act of like miraculous punishment, let's call it, or whether we're just not under the hashgachah to be protected from these things. Okay, that's one way to say it. And either way, it's a result of our liability, right? Either way, and we should use it as a prompt for tshuva. But the other way to take it is, I think it doesn't matter. Okay, and this is, again, I said this in a couple shiurim, but I'm going to say it again now. I have lately, the more I learn Tehillim, the more I've moved away of this hyperfixation on classifying things as hashgachah pratis, hashgachah klalis. And I've read this, it's hard to verify something that someone says, what do you call it? Blah, 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 black swan thing. Okay, which is if someone says that no one used the statement before so-and-so did, I can't investigate all statements that have ever been produced, but someone made the statement that the person who coined the terms hashgachah pratis and hashgachah klalis was one of the Ibn Tibons. Okay, there's Moshe Ibn Tibon, Shmuel Ibn Tibon, Yehuda Ibn Tibon. These were the translators of these Arabic works, like the Mor Nevuchim and Chovos HaLevavos. So someone said that they invented the terms hashgachah pratis and hashgachah klalis, and that no one before them used it. I don't know. Like, I have not. I can't verify that, but I'll tell you one thing. Torah Shebiksav never makes that distinction. Okay, in Torah Shebiksav, everything is directly ascribed to God. And in fact, the Rambam in the Mor Nevuchim, I think it's 226 or something like that, maybe, says that, in fact, let me find it so I don't have to say maybe. The Rambam says, Acts of Hashem in Mishlei, I think that's what I called it. Yeah, Rambam in... Oh, look, first of all, this Meiri, okay, this Meiri fits in with our Meiri here. The Meiri on Mishlei 10:3 says, this matter, okay, you don't need the context is, he's talking about how if you eat healthy foods, then your body will subsist. And if you don't eat healthy foods, then your body will suffer harm. Okay, and the pasuk that he's interpreting says, Hashem will not starve the soul of a tzaddik. Okay, which sounds like it means God will not let a tzaddik go hungry, but the Meiri explains it that the tzaddik eats healthy, and therefore he has everything he needs. So the Meiri says, this matter is ascribed to Hashem, for all things that come about through nature are ascribed to him. Blessed is he. It is as if the pasuk said, the tzaddik will not be in a state of starvation, and the rasha will be the opposite and will never be satisfied, as it says, the belly of the wicked will lack. Okay, so all things are described directly to Hashem in Torah Shebiksav, and the Rambam also says in the Mor Nevuchim, was I right? 248, I was not right. Okay, 248, the Rambam says that it is clear that everything that is produced must have an immediate cause which produced it, and that cause must have a cause, and so on, until the first cause, namely the will and desire of God, is reached. Therefore, the prophets sometimes omit mention of the intermediate causes and ascribe the production of a particular thing directly to God, saying that God has made it or did it. This is well known, and we, as well as other men of truth, have already explained it, is the belief of all of the adherents of Torah. And he clarifies later on, he says, it makes no difference whether these causes are natural and essential, or of free will, or of chance. In all of these cases, the prophets ascribe the production directly to God and use such phrases as God has made or done it, commanded it, or said it. And at the end, he reiterates, he says, you see, he gives a bunch of examples. You see clearly that the providing of a cause in whatever manner may this take place, by nature, chance, free will, or will, is always expressed by one of the 5 terms: commanding, saying, speaking, sending, or calling. Note this and apply it everywhere according to the context, and many difficulties will thereby be removed, and passages apparently containing things far from the truth will prove to be true. So in other words, the style of the Torah, of Tanakh, not just Torah, is to ascribe all things directly to God, and to not differentiate between hashgachah pratis and hashgachah klalis. Now, does that mean that hashgachah pratis and hashgachah klalis are not real categories? No, I'm just saying that the Torah never expresses it that way. It will always ascribe it directly to God. It'll say God makes the winds blow, God makes the rain fall, and I personally think that it can be useful when trying to understand hashgachah to realize that there are 2 modes of hashgachah, so to speak. But I think bad for a person's perfection to become overly fixated on that, because then you get into this position where you're trying to classify, is this hashgachah pratis or hashgachah klalis? And then if you think to yourself, oh, well, I'm not on the level to get hashgachah pratis, you end up making God into this deistic clock maker who is not involved in the universe. And then that feeds your ego, and it's very, very bad in many ways. Or you take the other approach and you make everything into hashgachah pratis, like the Baal Shem Tov's corrupt ideas, where he convinced everyone that everything is hashgachah pratis, which the Baal Shem Tov came up with. No one said that before the Baal Shem Tov. And and then you make everything into particular hashgachah pratis, and that's also detrimental. So I think it's very, very bad to be overly fixated on these 2 categories. And I think that a person should just say, I stub my toe, God made me stub my toe. I should do teshuvah, because there's no such thing as an occurrence that happens below without some sort of hate or liability that I can do teshuvah for.
I just want to say, I think that's really awesome, because it totally makes sense that since everything comes from, it's all God's will. It's God's will to love nature. It's God's will. We're doing like we are trying to like pin down exactly which one here or there. I don't even know why it's a certain kind of a I'm not gonna call it gaiva exactly, but like we're just trying to understand what's going on, and since it's all coming from God's will and he's got two different systems going, okay, like that's like you know, you try and get some sense of how the systems work, but to pin it down precisely, I don't know why we would think that we could do that.
Exactly. Yeah, and it might be beyond our grasp, but I'll give you a good example. Now that I just think about it, this example just occurred to me. If physicists are trying to figure out whether a certain phenomenon in the universe is due to gravity or electromagnetism, okay, or something that we don't yet understand. So in the study of physics, that is a very important question because it will lead you to clear knowledge of God. But in terms of how we behave, it doesn't matter, and it is all God, you know? So if a person said, I'm not interested in the distinction between gravity and electromagnetism, we'd say, oh, you're not interested in knowledge of God, right? That would be a fault. But if a person said, like, I'm not interested in the sense of how it affects my decision. If I like, you know, if I'm across the street, if I drive a car, like if I could not know how physics works, but I can know it's all from God, then that's fine. So same thing here. If a person says, I'm not interested in the distinction between hashgachah pratis and hashgachah klalis, that, like the Ramban says, is someone who hates knowledge. That's someone who hates chachma, okay? So we're not going that far. But if a person says, for practical purposes, in order to be able to do tshuva or to view like God as the cause of everything, it doesn't matter. I think that's a healthy mentality. So in other words, when you're studying hashgachah, yeah, try to like understand the difference between the two systems. But when you're experiencing life, then I think that distinction can like inhibit proper ways of relating to what happens to you.
That's so cool.
Yeah, that's, and again, this is like my current ever evolving like view of hashgachah, but I haven't expressed it yet in a shiur. So that's part of why I wanted to give the shiur. Okay. So I want to show you, now I want to go back and answer a question we haven't touched yet, okay? So why do you need both pasukim? Now, this is a little speculative, okay? But why do we need the pasuk of Tehillim and the pasuk from Mishlei if Mishlei alone should suffice, okay? From the Hashem are the footsteps of man, which is exactly the same as what the Tehillim says, okay? And man, what does he understand of his way? Now, this is a little speculative, okay? But the idea is going to be true. So whenever you want to understand a pasuk in Tehillim, you should look at it in context, okay? So I'm going to read an entire parak of Tehillim, and I'm just using art scrolls, so we're not here forever, okay? And you tell me who the parak is about, okay? I'm going to read it like really fast. By David, do not compete with evildoers, be not envious of the doers of injustice, for like grass they will be cut down swiftly, and like green vegetation they will wither. Trust in Hashem and do good, dwell in the land and nourish yourself with faithfulness, and rely upon Hashem for your enjoyments, for he will grant you the desires of your heart. Commit your way to Hashem, rely on him, and he will act. He will bring forth your righteousness like the light, and your justice like high noon. Wait silently for the salvation of Hashem, and wait longingly for him. Do not compete with him who prospers, with the man who executes malicious plans. Desist from anger and forsake wrath. Do not compete, it brings but harm. For the evildoer shall be cut off, but those who hope to Hashem, they shall inherit the earth. Just a little longer, and there will be no wicked one. You will contemplate his place, and he will not be there. But the humble shall inherit the earth, and delight in abundant peace. The wicked man plots against the righteous person, and gnashes his teeth at him. The Lord laughs at him, for he has seen that his day approaches. The wicked drew a sword and bent their bows to bring down the poor and the destitute, to slaughter those of upright ways. Slaughter those of upright ways. Their sword will pierce their own heart, and their bows will be broken. Better is the little of the righteous than the great multitude of the wicked. For the arms of the wicked will be broken, but the support of the righteous is Hashem. Hashem knows the days of the perfect. Their inheritance will be forever. They will not be shamed in a time of calamity, and in the days of famine they will be satisfied. For the wicked will perish, and the foes of Hashem are like the glory of fattened sheep. Consume in smoke they are consumed. The wicked one borrows but repays not, while the righteous is generous and gives. For his blessed ones shall inherit the earth, while his accursed one shall be cut off. By Hashem are a man's footsteps established, and he shall favor his way. Should he totter, he will not be cast down. Hashem supports his hand. I have been a youth and also aged, but I have not seen a righteous man forsaken, nor his children begging for bread. All day long he is gracious and lends, and his children are a blessing. Turn from evil and do good, that you may dwell forever. For Hashem loves justice and does not forsake his devout ones. They will be eternally protected, but the offspring of the wicked are cut off. The righteous will inherit the earth and dwell upon it. The mouth of the righteous man utters wisdom, and his tongue speaks justice. The Torah of God is in his heart. His footsteps will not falter. But the wicked one watches for the righteous one and seeks to kill him. But Hashem will not forsake him to his hand, nor let him be condemned when he is judged. Hope to Hashem and safeguard his way, and he will raise you high to inherit the earth. You will witness the excision of the wicked. I have seen a wicked man powerful, well-rooted like a native evergreen, yet he vanished, and behold, he was no more, and I sought for him, but he was not to be found. Guard the perfect and watch the upright, for there is a destiny for the man of peace. But the sinners are destroyed together. The destiny of the wicked is to be cut off, and the salvation of the righteous is from Hashem, their might in a time of distress. Hashem helped them and caused them to escape. He will cause them to escape the wicked, and he will save them, for they took refuge in him. So I mean, I tried to give it away. Who is this pasuk talking about? This parak, I mean. What kind of person?
I'm a little confused. Isn't it talking about a bunch of different kinds of people?
You could say that if you want, but I don't think so. It's talking about righteous people. Okay. Everything it says about how Hashem relates to people is only the righteous, the upright, the devout, those who trust in Hashem, those who are pious, those who give to the poor. It's talking about, and it says tzaddik. I mean, you can't see it in Hebrew. It says tzaddik many, many times. Okay. And in fact, if you look at our pasuk, which is Me'Hashem mitzadei gever, from Hashem are the footsteps of man. Okay, and it sounds like it's talking about every person. If you look at almost all the Mefarshim, mitzadei gever, Rashi says, Mishu gibur b'yiras HaKadosh Baruch Hu, someone who is strong in fear of God. Okay, Ibn Ezra says, gever bilashonenu hu male das, someone who's filled with knowledge. Umishu male das tzadik yihiyeh, someone who's going to be a tzaddik because he's filled with knowledge. And it says when God favors his way, Hashem chafetz b'chol drachav, Hashem favors all of his ways. So we're talking about someone who has knowledge and Hashem favors all of his ways. Radak says, Mi Hashem mitzadei gaver konanu v'darko yechbatz hatzadik shemis gaber b'masav hatovim al harasha. The whole parak is about the tzaddik versus the rasha, not talking about average people. Okay, someone who's a tzaddik who overpowers in his good actions. He overpowers the rasha. Hakel yikon sa'ado v'achpotz darko. God will make firm his footsteps and take pleasure in his way. Al derech v'chol asher yasa yatzliach, as it says in the first parak of Tehillim, everything he does will succeed. V'tam yechpatz shiur b'drachav chafetz hakel. Uriah, I think his ways will demonstrate the will of God. Uritzono yatzliach bakol, and God's will be that he succeeds in all of his actions. V'tam mitzadeh v'darko, and the meaning of mitzadeh and darko is ki b'chol asher yanua b'chol iskav yatzliach. Wherever he all of his motions he will succeed in. So the point is that Tehillim is talking about someone who is a tzaddik on a very high level, and yeah, that guy's children will not starve, and he'll succeed in everything he does, and the wicked people who oppose him will get shot by their own arrows. That's a high level of hashgachah. Okay, but Mishle, okay, in general, unless it says specifically, is not talking about a tzaddik. Mishle is written for the Na'ar and the Pesi and the Chacham and the Navon. If there is a pasuk that talks about a tzaddik, then you could say it's talking about a tzaddik. But this is Me'Hashem mitzadei gaver v'adam mayavin darko, right? From man's footstep, from Hashem are the footsteps of man, and man, what does he understand of his own way? And if you look at the Mefarshim here, so then they all give very general interpretations. For example, Rabbeinu Yonah says, "Im yatsa l'derech, yetze l'derech." If a man goes out on the way, or yifarish b'yam, or he goes onto the sea, overseas, lihistacher b'schora, to make money in business. Amim Rabos Yikrenu have said Timuras hasachar. Many times he'll suffer loss instead of gain. Asher yisaber elav, which he hoped for. V'chi yelech levetach yifkiuhu mikrim. And when he walks securely, then chance occurrences will befall him. V'toldos, and toldos is Rabbeinu Yonah's word for things in nature. Chance occurrences and natural things will befall him. Al Kain, therefore, al binaska al tishayin. Do not rely on your own understanding. Raksim kol tochaltecha el Hashem yisale. Put all your trust in Hashem. Meiri says, he says this is also an idea that you should put your trust in God. Don't rely on your own strivings. Recognize that your way is not in your own hands. Meaning how things turn out is not in your own hands. Daven to God constantly to guide your actions for benefit and for greatness. This is what it's telling you here by way of informing you. Many times a person will plan a certain way and then his thoughts will be thwarted. And you should know that if you do succeed, then this came from Hashem. You should remember Hashem your God because he's the one who gave you the ability to make wealth. So the point I'm trying to make here is that the pasuk in Tehillim is talking specifically to a righteous person who God is individually supervising everything that happens to him. The pasuk in Mishle is talking to the average person saying, you should be aware that not everything is going to turn out how you want it to, because there are all these chance occurrences that can happen, but you should recognize that it's from Hashem no matter what. So I find it interesting that the way we interpreted this pasuk or this statement of Chazal, that like you should keep an open mind and realize that whether this is hashgachah pratis or hashgachah klalis, it's from God and it should get me to do tshuva. And I shouldn't be fixated on classifying it. I should just realize this is from God and I should do tshuva. It's interesting that the two psukim that it quotes, one of them supports the a person who is getting this as a miraculous hashgachah pratis thing, and the other is supporting every single person in whatever footsteps he takes. So that's my answer to question number 3, which is how did the psukim contribute to the thesis, is that either way, your footsteps come from God in one of those two frameworks, one of those two systems. Okay. Does that make sense? Okay. One last step, okay, is how do we do this? Okay. If you stub your toe, is it just, oh, I stubbed my toe? I should think about whether I'm being honest in business dealings and like keeping kosher and like, like learning Torah. Like, is it just like a random thing, like just investigate your actions? Okay. So I found another meiri. Again, I've kind of been drawn to the meiri on this topic. So there's this cryptic statement that the meiri quotes elsewhere, okay, which on the surface is very astonishing. Okay. Ksubos daf lamed. I'm sorry, I'm going to go a little overtime. Okay. But, I'm sorry. Okay. Ksubos daf lamed amad aleph and beis. Tani Rabbi Chia. So Rabbi Chia said, Miyom shachar beis hamikdash. Once the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, which by the way, all the Mefarshim say, it's not when the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. It was a little bit beforehand. Okay. The point is that once the Sanhedrin stopped trying capital cases. Okay. So once the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, Alpha Pisha Bitlu Sanhedrin Arba Misos. Sorry. Alpha Pisha Bitlu Sanhedrin Arba Misos Lo Batlo. Okay. So even though the 4 death penalties ceased, even though the Sanhedrin was dissolved and ceased, the 4 death penalties did not cease. Okay, so in other words, you can only be tried by the Sanhedrin for a death penalty and executed when they are in the Lishkas Hagazis, the chamber of hewn stones in the Beis Hamikdash, and at a certain point they exiled themselves, and so no longer were there any court cases. So you might think, now's my chance to get away with murder and not be get a capital crime, or now I can do one of the arayos and not get capitally punished. But Chazal are saying no. The punishments are still in effect. Okay, how so? Okay. So it says ha batlulahu. Oh, all right, fine. So first the Gemara says, wait, didn't the arba misos cease? So it says ella din arba misos lo batlu. Sorry, I jumped the gun. So the 4 actual capital cases did cease, but the judgment of the 4 cases did not cease. Okay, how so? Mishnas chayav skila. Okay, if you're liable for so Rashi says, I'm going to actually read Rashi in concert with this. Din arba misos is onesh dugmasam. Similar punishments did not cease. So in other words, you're not going to be actually executed by being stoned to death, but you're going to get a similar punishment. You're not going to be executed by Beis Din in court, but you're going to get a similar punishment. Okay, how so? He says, so the Gemara says, Mish nischayev skila, if you were liable for skila, for stoning, o nofel minagag, o chaya dorasto. Either you will fall from a roof or a wild animal will tear you apart. Okay, so Rashi explains, nofel minagag, domil leniskal, right? Because remember, stoning to death does not mean that they throw stones at you. Stoning to death works that they push you off of a tall place and then you land on a stone, okay, on the stone floor. So this guy is who's chayav skila, even though Beis Din can't punish him, he'll fall off of a roof and die. La'arz degvoa shtei komos, fine, okay. Or an animal will tear him up. Chaya dorasto. So on the surface, you'd be like, what does animal tearing you, mauling you have to do with skila? So Rashi says, Ari mapilu la'arz v'horgo b'drisa. He'll throw you to the ground and like tear you up. So I guess the way it works with skila is you first get pushed off onto a stone floor, and if that kills you, great. If not, they flip you over and then they push the boulder on top of you. And if that doesn't work, then they throw stones at you. So I guess when they're throwing stones at you, it's like tearing you up. So maybe that's what the animal's doing. I'm not sure exactly what he's saying. Mishnas chayv streifa, if you're liable for burning, and remember, burning is not being burned at the stake, it's esophageal burning, where they scald your esophagus with molten lead. So what happens? O nofel b'tleika, either you'll fall into a fire, o nachash machisho, or a snake will bite you. Rashi says nachash machisho ha'aris sorfo, and the venom will burn you. Okay, so it's like some sort of internal death, which is comparable to like an internal fire. Mishnas chayv hariga, or if you are liable for being executed by decapitation, either you'll get handed into the government, and Rashi says, they'll cut off your head beside with a sword. That's how they kill people who are rebelling against the government. That's the misa of decapitation. O listim buying alav, or bandits will come upon you. I guess they'll decapitate you. Mishin is chayv chenek, and if you're liable for strangulation, o tovei benahar, either you'll drown, which is you'll be strangled. O mes besarunki, or you'll die of askara, which is diphtheria, I think they say. Of who bagaron. That's in the some throat disease. Okay, so on the surface, it's saying that if you do one of these arba misos nowadays, if you you do you commit one of the arayos, you eat well, there's no eating things. You worship before Zara, you break, do malacha on Shabbos. You're going to get chayiv in one of these death penalties, and then one of these things that's similar to the punishment will happen to you. Now, what's the biggest problem with such a statement that these penalties are still in effect today?
This might not be what you were thinking, but I mean, isn't it supposed to be through Beis Din, and there's no Beis Din? Like, who said it's coming through Shemayim?
Okay, so that's what they're teaching us, right? They're saying that God is, in fact, there's an open pasuk that says this, which is in Bereshis, when it's going through the Sheva Mitzvos B'nai Noach, in Perek Tes, it says, and now this is for non-Jews, but it also applies to Jews. Shofek dam ha'adam ba'adam damu yishafech. Sorry. Okay, this is such a hard pasuk to translate. Umyad ha'adam miyad ish achiv edrosh es nefesh adam. So I'm just going to cheat and use Neiman Novetsky's translation. Where did it go? And indeed, your blood, which is your soul, I Hashem will seek out. From every animal I will seek it, and from every man. From each man of his brother, I will seek the soul of man. So Chazal say that that's referring to a case where basically Beis Din didn't catch you, and you might think that you got away with it, and it's saying no, God will kill you, and that's what we call Misa B'dei Shemayim. So that's where we see that even when the Beis Din doesn't carry out the punishments, God carries them out, and that's even while Beis Din is still around. So this is even when Beis Din is gone. So to me, the problem is you're telling me that all the people who do all of these sins get these punishments? Really? Is that true? Like, I don't think it's true. I think if you did a statistical survey, you would look around and you'd find like how many people commit murder and then die in prison or die of a disease and don't get their heads cut off, right? Just take that fact alone. If you do murder, you get your head cut off, right? Do all of them really die of decapitation or getting like, is this really true? Like this just does not, or how many people violate Shabbos, do malacha on Shabbos, and don't fall off of a roof, right? So this sounds ludicrous on the surface. Okay, now, yeah.
You could say that it's not every time that it happens.
Right. Okay. So the two answers that I saw here are the Ritva and the Tosfos. They both acknowledge this. So Ritva, and they both do it in different ways. So Ritva says, Perush ba'osam shenitfalu dinam ba'olam hazeh, with those who get punished for this sin in this world, then they get a punishment that is similar to them. Okay, certainly there are murderers and people who do lots of averos who die in peace and tranquility. Nidonim ba'olam haba. They get punished in olam haba, v'zeh barer, and that's clear. Okay, so he's not saying it's going to happen to every person. He's saying if God punishes this person for this sin in this world, it'll happen this way. And then Tosfos says similarly, he says, you see many transgressors and idol worshippers who die on their beds, right? Die of old age. You could say that because of tshuva, then God is mekil. Sometimes he forgives them entirely. Or they had a merit. That the merit was effective for them. And they don't get punished during their lifetime. Okay, fine. So in other words, there are it's not saying that this is a hard and fast rule, but what this does mean practically is if you do see a murderer who is a known murderer, let's say O.J. Simpson ends up getting killed and he gets decapitated, right? So what it's saying is we should look at that and say that's mida k'neged mida. Okay. But if someone murders and does not get decapitated, then there are many reasons why he might not be decapitated, because God's system of schar ownership is complex. Okay. So, but what I want to deal with though is how do we apply this to the toe stubbing? Okay. And that might not look like it applies, but watch this. Okay. Meiri says as follows. And this is, I'm bringing this in as a model for how you should be. He said, when you stub your toe, you should be mefashfish b'masav and do tshuva. You should analyze your actions and do tshuva. So check out how the Meiri interprets this. Okay. Roy la'adam lihizbonin tamid ulefashfish b'masav. Person should contemplate his own actions and analyze contemplate constantly and analyze his own actions. All the more so when he suffers a punishment. That is fit for him. It is fit for him to analyze his actions to see if there was any sin. Okay, in other words, you should do it constantly even when you're not getting punished. But when you get a punishment, like stubbing your toe, you should definitely look for a sin. You should see what sin it came from. You should not be suspicious of God's judgments and say that it came not through uprightness. Okay, in other words, don't accuse God of injustice. And don't be stiff-necked about the punishment to think it's just a chance occurrence. Okay, so those are two mistakes you could make. You could either like distort your understanding of why God is doing this to you and say, oh, God is like punishing me unjustly, or you could not treat it as a punishment and just say, oh, it's chance and this has nothing to do with tshuva. Okay, don't do those things. You should say everything came based on justice, and according to the punishment, you should investigate that avera shabiado that is in your hand. And look at it based on the sin that you got based on that punishment. So now he explains our Gemara in that light. Okay, and this is going to walk us through an example of how to do this. All right. So the Gemara says, even though the actual capital punishments have ceased, the punishment of the capital punishments have not ceased. Even if you are saved from the punishment, since the punishment came upon you as a test or a trial, do not be lax in the matter. You were not brought into this for no reason. Here was an instance. Now, I don't think he's quoting from a Gemara because otherwise it would cite it. I think this must be something that he heard. Okay. There was a chacham. He was climbing a ladder. The nishmat raglo, and his foot slipped. Ad shekimat shenafal lakarka. He almost fell to the earth. Der chabata, and hit the ground. Shehumina dina hadomim laskila, which is one of the cases that is similar to stoning, right? Stoning is you fall from a height and you die. This guy didn't even fall; he slipped and almost fell. Okay. V'haya navok al atmo. He was perplexed about himself. Hea chaya balide owner skila. How was I liable for skila? V'lo mata. Ba'atmo tzad chil Shabbos o iser avodah zara shedinam b'skila. He did not find any punishment that was like chil Shabbos or avodah zara that is fit for skila. Now, this is totally reasonable, right? I mean, there are only a handful of things that are chayav skila, and you could search yourself and be like, okay, I didn't deserve skila, so why did I get this? V'amar lo echad mitalmidav, and one of his students said to him, Shema hisrashel b'mitzvahs hatzedakah. Maybe you were lax in the mitzvah of tzedakah. Shahamalim ayin mimena dome leisur avodah zara. That I guess there's a statement of Chazal that says, if you hide your eyes from giving tzedakah, then that's comparable to avodah zara. As we've written, and if anyone who applies these things constantly will not sin quickly. So this amazing thing that you see from here, by the way, is the Gemara itself is saying that the din of the Arba Misos is not literal. You could deserve skila and die by falling, or you could deserve skila and die by being torn up by an animal, which is really not comparable to falling. Or you can be chayav sreifa and die by being poisoned because we call venom affecting you burning. But the Meiri is taking it way further. He's saying, even if you actually didn't suffer the onesh, you should still use it as a springboard for investigating yourself. And then even if you don't find it, you should associate, even based on these loose philosophical connections. The guy didn't give tzedakah properly. You're not chayav misa for not giving tzedakah properly. Yet, Chazal compared not giving tzedakah properly to avodah zarah, and this guy almost fell, which would have been chayav skila. So he puts it together and does tshuva. So what you're seeing here from the Meir is he's modeling for you the type of associations that you should have. So for example, let's say you stub your toe, right? So because you're walking too quickly, right? So there is a pasuk in Mishlei that says God hates. Let me see if I'm just thinking of this example now, which is why I didn't put it in the thing. It says talking about people who God hates. I think it's in chapter 3. Yeah, no, Sheish. To'avas nafsho. Hold on. Yeah, Mishlei 6:16. Hashem hates 6 people, and the 7th is an abomination to his soul. Einayim ramos, haughty eyes, lashon shaker, a false tongue, v'yadayim shochos dam naki, and hands that spill innocent blood. Leiv chorish machshavos aven, a heart that plots iniquitous thoughts. Raglaim mimaharos larutz lara'a, feet that run quickly to do evil. Yafiach kazavim et shaker, one who spouts lies will not be vindicated. One who spouts lies, a false witness, and one who starts quarrels between people. So let's say you stub your toe, right? So it's not one of the arba misos. You don't get like toe stubbing as a punishment of basting. But maybe you think to yourself, oh, this pasuk saying that if you run to do evil, so then God hates you, right? So I should think to myself, like, have I been running to do evil in any way, Or I'll give you an example myself, okay? So I actually was thinking about this Gemara. This was 2 Shabbases ago. I think it was the extremely rainy Shabbos here in Far Rockaway, rainy and cold, okay? And what happened was I went to shul on Friday night, and it was very cold and it was very rainy. So I wore my winter leather gloves, okay? I hung up my coat and I put my gloves on a chair to dry out. Davin Mariv, came back, coat is there and gloves were not there, okay? And I looked all around, couldn't find my gloves. So I assumed someone took my gloves by mistake, okay? And these are my favorite gloves. And so I go out and it's raining all of Shabbos. And so for all of Shabbos, like my hands are cold, right? And I actually got to thinking, I was thinking about Yisurin in this way. And I was thinking like, I'm sitting here suffering from hands being cold, is there some tshuva I can do that's related to some sin that has to do with my hands? Now, let's say, truthfully, not just hypothetically, I didn't murder anybody, right? Yadayim shoflos dam naki, right? But let's take the tzedakah example, okay? Like, Chazal say that ani is a chashav kames, right? It's someone who's poor is like he's dead. And if you are not supporting people by giving them a livelihood, then it's possible that they are going to die, right? So it's like you're facilitating their death by not giving them tzedakah. I actually associated to tzedakah not via that route. I was thinking about there are people who are out in the cold who cannot afford gloves. Am I adequately involved in justice for like doing tzedakah for those people? I was thinking about that because that's how I think about like whenever it's bad weather outside because of my relationship with sukkah. So like. What you see from this Meiri is that's the kind of thinking of Yifashir Shemasav that you should do. And the goal is not to get to the right answer. You don't know whether God is miraculously punishing you for a specific chait or whether you're just not under the hashgachah, but the point is that you use it to do teshuvah, right? And there is something like embedded in the way that we think that we are attracted to symbolic, like symbolism. We know that Mida Keneged Mida is a reality, and like if you do teshuvah with something that you feel is connected to the thing you suffered, it's probably going to be a better impetus to teshuvah than doing teshuvah on a random thing. You could do teshuvah on a random thing, but like it's going to be a better teshuvah. And I would argue also, sometimes people hear this idea and they might object, saying like, well, am I just faking myself out? Well, the answer, first of all, is no, because you only suffered this because you were liable for it. But also, placebos work, okay? Like placebos work in medicine, but this is more than a placebo because it's actually getting you, like, at the end of the day, whatever gets you to do tshuva is good. So like, and it is from God. So I think that this is like I think this is what Chazal intend when they say, that when you stub your toe, you should think that This is from God. Oh, and there's 2 questions I didn't answer, and then I'll open up for questions. Sorry. The 2 questions I didn't answer are why dam ola, right? Why the blood of an ola? So I don't have a source for this, but again, I read this somewhere that anyone know what the tamid, the tamid is what we bring every day, and it's an olas tamid. What does the korban tamid atone for? Or maybe this is about olos in general. I don't know enough to say.
Oh, is it something that you think about? Like,
yes, it's your avera, right? It's fantasies or thoughts of sin. Okay, so I saw someone say that like stubbing your toe. It's not like it might. I don't know if they want to say this about stubbing your toe specifically, but the idea is that this might not even be for an actual sin. It could even be for like incorrect or sinful thoughts. You know, you should use this as an opportunity for reflecting on that. That's the only answer I found for why it's an ola. Maybe there's more answers for that. And then anyone have any idea? Yeah, sure. Yeah, Naomi? Nan? Yeah.
So, like in my experience, these experiences make you be honest with yourself. Because a lot of times you think you should think better, and then you're like, no, and give yourself excuses, and then when this happens, and you know what you did,
Yeah. Like, what if you just said to yourself, like, oh, I was walking too fast, or I was preoccupied. You've just wasted an opportunity for self-reflection and honesty. And like, let's say you just ask yourself, am I doing something wrong that I know is wrong? Like that question is just such a, that could just lead to so much self-improvement and tshuva, and God protecting you from toe stubbings. Yeah. Now, why Rabbi Elazar, this is the only question we haven't answered yet. Why Rabbi Elazar's qualification of your right toe, second scraping, and when you're walking to do a mitzvah?
Can I?
Yeah, Naomi.
Okay. So I was thinking the right toe, it's a little bit different than what we read elsewhere. But the right toe, like that's something that's like common, because that's what would happen frequently, because you usually, like most people are right-handed, right-footed. The second scraping is painful. And walking to do a mitzvah, it's like people have this idea of like someone who's involved in a mitzvah is protected from all harm, and all the questions about Yosef, etc. But like even in these circumstances where everything is like going bad, it's common, it's painful, and you should have been protected because you were doing a mitzvah anyway. No, this is how it works under all these circumstances, even.
Right. Okay, good. So my chavrusa David Rindy came up with a different idea, but gets to the same place, which is he wanted to say, just based on the Meiri emphasizing the pain, that there's the pain of you like Rashi had said, you're walking forcefully, so it's pain from the degree of it. Second scraping is you've already injured it, so it hurts even more. And then we walk into a mitzvah is like a righteous indignation. How could God let me have this when I was doing a mitzvah? So those cases are particularly good opportunities for self-reflection, because your whole instinctive reaction is, I don't deserve this. Oh, really? You don't deserve this? That's when you should that's when you're going to really be able, like, the more victimized you feel, the more you can reflect on the irrationality of the victimization feeling and then use that as a springboard for tshuva, Yeah.
Yeah, it reminds me of the Gemara that talks about when you put in your hand into your pocket. You pull out the wrong change.
Oh, man, I actually pulled out a Ramban to try to look for where he quotes that Gemara to incorporate this year, but I forgot to do it. I think the Gemara says ad heihan yisurin, like at what point. Right. How small do you go in terms of yisurin? And I think the 2 examples that it gives are you reach into your pocket for a quarter and you get a nickel, right? And then the Gemara says, well, what about if you reach into your pocket for a nickel and you get a quarter? And it's like, no, that's not yisurin, because you
that's not even inconvenient.
Exactly, yeah. And then the other one is when you accidentally put on your shirt inside out, So like these small little inconveniences are the measure. Yeah. Okay. Any questions? I'm sorry we went over time, but I feel like there's 2 things. First of all, there's a lot more that could be said, right? So I didn't want to go over into another shiur. But I hope you see what I was trying to set out to do here, which is, did we walk away with a full understanding of how all hashgachah works and schar v'onesh? No, we didn't. We didn't answer tzadik v'ralo. We didn't. But the point is, Chazal, we're trying to communicate something to you about what should you think when you stub your toe, and now we have what to think about when we stub our toe that is in line with at least the Meiri, Yeah.
Yeah. So Yisur and Shalava would be separate. That would be more like an offshoot in the tzadik v'ralo.
Yeah, so Yisurin Shal Ava is a controversial question, because it's a question of whether afflictions of love even exist, or whether that's not like, that's Machlokas Rishonim, whether it exists. And you have that Gemara that says when Yisurin, this is a Gemara in Brachos Hey Amud Beis, when Yisurin befall you, then you should analyze your actions. If you analyze your actions and don't find anything, then you should attribute it to Talmud Torah, which the Ramban says is to bittul aseh, which is like failing to fulfill any mitzvah say. And if you look and you don't find that, then you know that it's Yisurin Shal Ahava. So that's the Gemara, and yeah, I think that sounds like a different thing. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so
Yeah.
much. This was
Yeah.
really fun.
My pleasure. I'm glad you were able to make it.
Me too.
And I only look at the chats at the end, so I see. I don't send out the source sheet, but I can. Yeah, so I don't look at the chat during this year because I find it distracting. But I can send you the source sheet now, and you know, so you can have it. But yeah,
Thank you.
So sorry I didn't see that till now.
No,
Yeah.
it's all good. Actually, two separate people
Sure.
private messaged me and said that I could
Oh,
ask
okay.
afterwards, so.
Okay, good. All right. Okay, if there's any other questions, I'll take them. If not, then have a good Shabbos, and may we all have a productive toe stubbings, right? Yeah. All righty.
All right.
Have a good
Thank you.
Shabbos. All right. Bye.